Chapter 4. Jason. The fight was going great until he got stabbed. Jason slashed his gladius in a wide arc, vaporizing the nearest suitors. Then he vaulted onto the table and jumped right over Antinius' head. In midair, he willed his blade to extend into a javelin, a trick he'd never tried with this sword, but somehow he knew it would work. He landed on his feet, holding a 6-foot-long phylum. As Antinius turned to face him, Jason thrust the Imperial gold point through the ghoul's chest. Antinius looked down incredulously. "You! Enjoy the fields of punishment!" Jason yanked out his phylum, and Antinius crumbled to the dirt. Jason kept fighting, spinning his javelin, slicing through ghosts, knocking the ghouls off their feet. Across the courtyard, Annabeth fought like a demon too. Her dragonbone sword scythed down any suitor stupid enough to face her. Over by the fountain, Piper had also drawn her sword, the jagged bronze blade that she'd taken from Zethys the Boread. She stabbed and parried with the right hand, occasionally shooting tomatoes from her cornucopia in her left, while yelling at the suitors, "Save yourselves! I'm too dangerous!" That must have been exactly what they wanted to hear, because her opponents kept running away, only to freeze in confusion a few yards downhill, then charge back into the fight. The Greek tyrant Hippias lunged at Piper, his dagger raised, but Piper blasted him point blank in the chest with a lovely pot roast. He tumbled backwards into the fountain and screamed as he disintegrated. An arrow whistled towards Jason's face. He blew it aside with a gust of wind, then cut through a line of sword-wielding ghouls and noticed a dozen suitors regrouping by the fountain to charge Annabeth. He lifted his javelin to the sky. A bolt of lightning ricocheted off the point and blasted the ghost's ions, leaving a smoking crater where the earthen fountain had been. Over the last few months, Jason had fought many battles, but he'd forgotten what it was like to feel good in combat. Of course, he was still afraid, but a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time since waking up in Arizona with his memories erased, Jason felt whole. He knew who he was. He had chosen his family, and it had nothing to do with Beryl Grace or even Jupiter. His family included all the demigods who fought at his side, Roman and Greek, new friends and old. He wasn't going to let anyone break his family apart. He summoned the winds and tossed 3 ghouls off the side of the hill like rag dolls. He skewered a 4th, then willed his javelin to shrink back to a sword and hack through another group of spirits. Soon, no more enemies faced him. The remaining ghosts began to disappear on their own. Annabeth cut down Hasburdel the Carythian, and Jason made the mistake of sheathing his sword. Pain flared in his lower back, so sharp and cold he thought Chione the snow goddess had touched him. Next to his ear, Michael Varus snarled, "Born a Roman, die a Roman." The tip of a golden sword jutted through the front of Jason's shirt, just below his ribcage. Jason fell to his knees. Piper's scream sounded miles away. He felt like he'd been immersed in salty water, his body weightless, his head swaying. Piper charged towards him. He watched with detached emotion as her sword passed over his head and cut through Michael Varus's armor with a metallic ka-chink. A burst of cold parted Jason's hair from behind. Dust settled around him, and an empty Legionnaire's helmet rolled across the stones. The evil demigod was gone, but he had made a lasting impression. "Jason!" Piper grabbed his shoulders as he began to fall sideways. He gasped as she pulled the sword out of his back. Then she lowered him to the ground, propping his head against a stone. Annabeth ran to their side. She had a nasty cut on the side of her neck. "Gods!" Annabeth stared at the wound in Jason's gut. "Oh, gods!" "Thanks," Jason groaned. "I was afraid it might be bad." His arms and legs started to tingle as his body went into crisis mode. Seeing all the blood to his chest, the pain was dull, which surprised him, but his shirt was soaked red. The wound was smoking. He was pretty sure his sword wounds weren't supposed to smoke. "You're gonna be fine." Piper spoke the words like an order. Her tone steadied his breathing. "Annabeth! Ambrosia!" Annabeth stirred. Yeah, I got it." She ripped through her supply pouch and unwrapped a piece of godly food. "We have to stop the bleeding." Piper used her dagger to cut fabric from the bottom of her dress. She ripped the cloth into bandages.